Hello, everybody, and welcome to ABL Down on the Farm, episode 35, where we talk all things dynasty prospecting and fantasy baseball, but particularly fantasy baseball prospecting in the ABL, a 30-team dynasty league with 20 minor league slots for a glorious 600 prospects. Got a lot to cover tonight. Very excited to have a guest who's been on before, Zach of the Milwaukee Brewers in ABL, but a big-time Pirates fan. And we were talking some smack about Yadier Molina earlier this week, which I enjoyed. Got to hear about some legends in the Pittsburgh Pirate pipeline over the years. So that was a lot of fun. But without further ado, I'll bring Zach onto the show. And hey, Zach, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Steve. Appreciate it. Good to see you and good to see everybody. And yeah, thanks for the invite for this go round. Always happy to do this.
Yeah, happy to have you on, even though you disrespected Yadier a little bit, which is fine. Which is fine.
Even though it was the most unintentional, especially compared to my Pirate fan brethren, I feel like that I try to adequately respect Molina.
There you go. That's all I understand. He's an agitating character for most people in the NL Central.
Well, the Pirates, I mean, as being like the doldrums of the division for so long, the Cardinals have always sort of been like the very annoying big brother.
Sure.
Even in the few good years that they were good, the Pirates didn't win the division the 3 years from 10 years ago because of the Cardinals.
Because Alvin.
Some guys, I mean, the Cardinals always have those hitters who come up who are unheralded or not, or lesser heralded guys. And those are the guys who always seem to kill the Pirates. Like Pirates, the diehard Pirates fans are always like, man, like Colton Wong destroyed the Pirates. Matt Carpenter destroyed the Pirates.
Yeah.
They joked about Matt Adams because he went to college outside of Pittsburgh at Slippery Rock. Like he would destroy the Pirates, and they ended up being solid hitters.
Yeah, they were solid major leaguers. They actually both incidentally retired recently this year.
Yes, yes, they did. Yes, they did. Just within the last week or two for Wong and Carpenter, and they both had long, pretty successful careers. But they had Pujols-like numbers. It seemed like every time they played the Pirates.
Yeah.
So we're a little bit judgmental in that regard, but knowing that in reality that there's a lot of those guys are really good.
Yeah. No, I mean,
else we couldn't have them.
Yeah, there were some good players on that particular team of the Cardinals. There were some really solid players, and then they had the good role players around them, which that's what you're describing. That's what they were. They were role players. Well, enough about the major leagues because we're not here to talk about. I have one other like post major league anecdotal thing to say. So another NL Central thing. So Pete Rose is recently been made eligible for the Baseball Hall of Fame. So like what I'm wondering is like, how much do you think I can get for this baseball?
Oh,
I mean. So I
it's a good signature, actually. I
know, right? It's like a really clean kind of fancy. Like, can we get that on camera? There you go. Look at that. I mean,
he actually took he seemed to take more time to do that signature than he did with some of the things he said over the last couple decades. But he.
I agree. He was a character. Let me tell you. Like he was like very wonderful.
Yes. Yes. And it's one of those things where you feel like I guess the question is, do you actually want to sell it, or are you trying to actually? Are you?
I don't know. To be honest with you, all right. So like, I have some friends who are Reds fans, right? And honestly, like, I want to give it to them. Like, to me, like I got this base. I didn't pay for it. I was at an event. I met Pete Rose. It was like they were giving away the signed baseball. Great. I'm not a Reds fan. I mean, I understand who he is. I love baseball. Like he's a big character in baseball, particularly in the era that I grew up watching. But like, if it means something more to like some guy who like grew up in Cincinnati and followed the Reds and loves Pete Rose, like I'd rather.
And it's also one of those things too. Like you always feel a little icky about like, oh hey, let's sell this right after somebody passes away.
Yeah.
But at the same time, knowing that like Rose, he spent so much of his last couple decades signing autographs all over the place. Like he was
Yep.
constantly at memorabilia shows or doing whatever he could. So it's not like it's particularly rare compared to,
Right.
someone who may have passed away like 50 years ago. And I was gifted like a Brooks Robinson autographed like stamp. And I've never been an Orioles fan or anything, but like I understand and respect the
Sure.
amazing player that he was. And I never got to see him play either, but other than old videos. But knowing like then you're like, oh, he unfortunately passed away. I think it was early last year, and
Yeah.
that thought enters your mind, like, oh, there's not gonna be anything new that goes out there, but you still feel. But this is a historical thing that you have. And I kind of feel the same way as you, where I would feel more comfortable. Like I'd either like to hold on to it because it's a nice relic that you might not have. That you can say, hey, cool, I have something like this, or to give it to somebody who truly is such a fan, as a fan of that team, respects all of that, who doesn't have something like that, who can really treasure it and respect what that is.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. That's right. I mean, there's certain. I have like a collection of baseballs behind me, and there's certain ones that like I would like kill you over. Like they're not going anywhere. Like
Absolutely, yes.
Like it's okay. It's kind of what I'm like. All right, like I mean, I got a Dwight Gooden one back there that's not going anywhere.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. That's yep.
So so
I once wanted to. I would love to be able to, like it. I mean, I'm a baseball card collector, and autographed baseballs would be pretty darn cool, but it'd be to get. I have a friend who lives here in Buffalo, actually, who I met, who's a diehard Pirates fan, who just has already hundreds of autographed baseballs, and I'm just like, where do you put all of it?
Yeah,
I'm already out of space for my cards.
My wife has told me that I can't exceed the case. So there's actually a selfish reason to actually get rid of the Pete Rose one, because like it creates a spot. But like
that's true. That's true. Like my wife's already told me I have one closet in the new house.
Yeah,
for my that's like that's it.
Correct. Yeah, that's how it works. You have to know our place, right?
Yeah.
That's all right. They become baseball widows during the fantasy baseball season, so it's all a trade off, right?
Absolutely.
So tell me about your Bison's hat. You go to a lot of games out there?
So we started. I've always liked getting some. I've always, since I worked as a second job when I lived in Seattle, I started through a lids company. So I started getting more hats at that point. And I'm not really a big hat wearer regularly, just in regards to baseball stuff, because I've loved baseball and I've accumulated a lot of hats. But I like getting a lot of the different designs whenever I can. And we've gone, at least my two boys now, they don't totally understand baseball at all yet, although they're both playing t-ball or little league ball at ages 7 and 4. So we've gone to a couple games each the last couple of years, and I've got a few hats, Bison's hats. I have because I would like to, and maybe next time I'm on, I'll try to find it whenever. But I've had a couple Seattle team hats. I've got like the Everett Aqua Sox.
Oh, that's cool.
And the Tacoma Rainiers. I got one of each of those. But this is kind of like their standard colors, their standard, like this is like the typical Bison's. I think I have two other ones that are sort of alternate logos, but this is sort of the last several years. And I kind of like, oh, this is perfect. We're talking about prospects. We got a minor league hat here, but my one, I don't know if it's my favorite. We might've talked about this before too, but I have a hat of a team that's no longer in existence. That's about 45 minutes down the road, for the Batavia Muck Dogs.
Oh, I love the name. That's great.
Yeah, it was from the New York Penn League, which no longer exists because Major League, they cut the short season teams for mostly it was college players after they were drafted. So now they cut that league. There was all these teams in New York and Pennsylvania, which is my neck of the woods. I'm like, as soon as I move out here, I'm like, hey, I got a team. I can go drive here, drive half an hour. And they were there for 1 or 2 seasons before they got rid of it. So, but I did get one of those hats too. But I like this one because it's a standard Bison's hat that they've had for a good while now, and they'll have more into the future. And I like that they're the Blue Jays affiliate now, which is good. But they were the Pirates affiliate in the early 90s whenever I was growing up. So they at least got that connection there too now. But they've been the Blue Jays for quite a while.
Yeah. Yeah, it's adjacent to Toronto, so it makes sense. So
Very
that's cool.
close, yeah.
That's cool. So listen, I wanted to talk a little bit about your prospects on your team. Some of the ones I highlighted before the show, but in the context of what we're coming up on our particular league, but I think for a lot of leagues, which is kind of a hot fantasy prospecting trading season, because you're often in situations at this point of the year where teams are either going to punt or they're going to go for it. In our league, we talk about dump trades versus teams that aren't dumping and are trying to win. Um, but different leagues use different terminology. Um, but it starts to affect, at least in my view, how you start thinking about your roster, your prospecting roster, and thinking about what players you think you can commoditize, and like which ones you can't. So who are you going to sell? Are there people you're willing to sell low? Are there people you're willing to sell high? We'll talk about some of the guys like on your roster that I highlighted because I think they fall into these camps. And then thinking what you can really get from them. What is the value you can extract right at this point? And my team. So your team is like in a position where you're 14-7 going into this week's competition. So you've got
Somehow, I still don't understand that, but
you got a winning record, right? And so you're in the playoff chase. My team has a losing record right now. After several years of having winning records, winning the division, I'm like rebooting for next year. It was kind of the plan going into the season that I'd be kind of like working up to the dump deadline. And so things have gone exactly kind of how I expected them to go. So now I'll be selling my major leaguers and buying minor leaguers. So we have kind of different trajectories for this season, and it'll be interesting to see how it pivots for both of us, and going into next year. So we can have a kind of I hope an interesting discussion about kind of how we're thinking about players on the rosters and what's attractive and what's not. So with that in mind, I thought we'd start with one of your players who's getting a lot of hype right now, which is Jacob Reimer of the Mets. And so I just put a couple of stats on the bottom here of the scroll. He's 21 in high A, so age appropriate for his level. Not particularly, young, but young for his level. But so you'd like to see that. And I put his slash line there, which is actually quite incredible. He's throwing the ball.
It keeps getting better somehow. Yeah. Which I'm not expecting that to stay that way.
You expect some regression, but I mean, those numbers are pretty ridiculous. He's got 307 isolated power. I mean, that's like obscene.
And he's an interesting guy because, and it's even actually funny because I picked him up not that long ago on waivers or through free agency.
Yep, May 1st you got him. But what was interesting to me looking at that was you actually owned him before.
And
you cut him, right? So about a year ago, you cut bait with him. So tell me about that. Why did you cut him back then? And what turned you on to him way back then? Because he wasn't like a name. All right. He's not a guy who's on like a lot of top 30s for the team. He's not a guy who was on a lot of prospect lists before. So what initially attracted you to him? And then you dropped him, and then you were fortunate to get him like really before the hype train picked up in full speed. So talk to me about that process.
Right. And it's funny how that all works out, because I've sort of felt like that not all my prospecting, but in a couple years ago, I went all in, or at least I've traded some pretty big prospects. I traded John, the Tigers. I traded him Ryan Clifford and Jared Jones in the same deal to go for it for, I believe, it might have been Barrios or Pablo Lopez, to go for it. And in doing that, I haven't been afraid to trade some prospects, at least before. I'm a little bit more afraid now in this kind of league. But I can't say that I'll never do it, but I'm always trying to scour like every day, who does what every day, who does well, who's heating up, who's cooling down.
Yep.
Who are the unheralded guys who may not have been on top 30 lists or top 20 lists.
Yep.
But who have something that pops out. even if it's just like a strictly steals guy, is it strictly a power guy? Is it someone who's young for the level? Is it a high school guy who was a third or fourth round pick like Reimer was?
Mm-hmm.
He might have even been a sixth round pick. He might have been a little bit later. Sometimes you get the high schoolers who are 11th, 12th round picks who
Yep.
are after that bonus level
Mm-hmm.
cutoff, who they might get lost because they are later picks. So who are these guys? And Reimer was a guy who he had a pretty decent year in low A
Mm-hmm.
when I picked him up originally. I believe it was 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But it was nothing really like, nothing that really said like, man, this guy's going to be awesome. But he had an okay hit tool. He had some potential power from everything that I had read, and he held his own. Sometimes whenever you're that young, you got the high school. I mean, it takes some of these guys so long to figure it out.
Sure.
And whenever you're trying to piece the back end of your 15 to 20 prospects, that what's really like and you want to me, I always like to try to diversify my portfolio, if you will. Different positions, hitters versus pitchers,
Yep.
far away versus, rookie league to some single A's. I like to try to space it out as much as I can throughout everything. He's a guy. He's one thing is that he wasn't a shortstop. He was a third baseman, so he's
Mm-hmm.
probably going to be corner only.
Yep.
So that puts more pressure on the bat. But 2 years ago he did pretty well.
Yep.
And I stuck with him through there. The reason why I cut him is not because I didn't like him, but he missed almost all of last season. The first half of the year he had, I can't remember. It wasn't like a big concerning injury, but it was something that I can't remember now. But he missed at least like half the year last year. And when he came back, he did fine, but he was supposed to be, I believe, in high A last year.
Mm-hmm.
But which would have been, he would have been 20. So, and he did do a little bit, and he didn't light the world on fire either there.
Yeah, I'm looking at his
he didn't get a
numbers
lot of
here.
time.
Yeah, I'm looking at his numbers. He had very limited plate appearances, going to your point that he missed a lot of the year. He started in the CPX, okay, which is usually where they send players after coming off an injury, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Very limited plate appearances, at 11 plate appearances in the CPX. Went up to A-ball, which was a step down for him because he had been at high A in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
So they're like easing him back in. Had 29 plate appearances there. Did very well, mashed the ball. Okay. 333, 448, 417. Limited plate appearances, 29 plate appearances. Like, they moved him up to high A kind of towards the end of the year, 55 plate appearances. His ratios were pretty good in terms of strikeouts to walks, but his slash line was pretty abysmal, right? He had like 196, 327, 261, right? So he struggled.
So that's not good at all. But again, when you add up all those plate appearances, that's not a whole lot of plate appearances.
No,
so he did not play a lot. And when it came down to it, it's just, in last year I was also in a dump position. So I was accumulating other prospects. And to me, I can't say this about every guy, and I'm curious about what you think about this too, and other people throughout the league. We all pick up guys who are maybe at the time, our 16 to 20th, prospects. But some of them you go, some of them you just like cut, and you're like, okay, you cut bait, and it was fun while it lasted, right?
Yep.
But some of them you go, I want to cut him, but I'm going to keep him on my watch list, and I'm going to keep paying attention to what he does. And that if something happens, like there's the first iota of something coming back, and if you've got an empty spot, bring him back in. And he was always in that boat for me.
That was your guy.
And
all right.
And whenever he started off hot, I'm like, oh. And it was also kind of funny because I didn't realize it at first because I hadn't really seen the numbers, how well he had done right away.
Mm-hmm.
And and it was almost kind of funny because this is where being in multiple leagues kind of is funny because I can't say this for sure, but I'm almost positive someone else picked him up in the ACL.
Uh-huh.
And they didn't in the ABL unless it was an owner who's not in the ABL. I don't remember who it was. So I was like, holy cow, like this, I don't know, how did I miss this? So then like the next day went and got him. And then he's even crushed the ball more ever since then. So
Yeah.
but I have a couple other guys who I've cut in the last year or two who I'm still keeping that eye on just in case.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
I definitely have like, guys who yo-yo off my roster and back on, and they're certainly on the watch list for sure. It's interesting what you mentioned about like other leagues, queuing you into like a guy like who's on other people's radar and how that makes you act. Right? You can say like, all right, you know what? I have to either do this or not because like the other owners are starting to pay attention, and ACL is a relatively new league. This is our inaugural season, excuse me. But another 30-team Dynasty league with 20 minor league slots. So it's very similar or exactly the same as ABL in that regard. The scoring system's a little bit different than the playoff structure, but there's not complete overlap in the ownership. But when you see guys who are pretty sharp owners kind of queuing into a player that's on your watch list, it kind of tells you like, oh, like I better pick this guy up if I really want to have him because he's gonna get sniped if I don't do it, right? And then, the other thing that I find, and I've talked about it on the show over the years, is that there are owners that I really respect in terms of their prospecting acumen, and when I see them pick up a guy in one league, I'm like, oh, who's this dude? I looked into it, right?
And I know that you have mentioned on several other ones. I know like the show with Frank was great not that long ago, but there's so much information out there now. And there's so many different avenues to get that information. So a lot of people are reading the same things, and that's hard to do that. So how do you get that advantage, especially with like some people don't have the luxury of saying, well, I'm going to pay for every subscription under the sun.
Right.
So you have to pick and choose. What are you doing? And you might not want to find the most unique one out there that no one knows about because it also might be some guy in his, some guy in his basement blogging,
right.
without much, firsthand knowledge about it.
It could be some guy with a podcast about ABL.
It could be some guy who does his own handbook. You never know.
Exactly right. It could be some fool. So like, let's just finish the conversation with Jacob, right? So like, he's red hot. He's having a great year, right, at high A. You'd like to see him eventually get advanced to Double A, the way he's hitting, right? But he's got 162 plate appearances at high A. He's killing it.
Yep.
The slash line just shows that. His strikeout rate is right around 21%. His walk rate is about 11.5. Which is in line with what he has done through every level. So they seem like pretty consistent baselines, which is playable, right?
Definitely not too high, not especially still being relatively, you'd like him to advance more, but he's still not old for his level. So that's still pretty acceptable.
Now, the thing that really stood out for me, right, is his isolated power right now, which is kind of ridiculous. 307 is like out of control, right? I mean, 200 is considered like really good, right? He's got a 307 isolated power. That's absurd.
I was surprised that wasn't a typo.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at it right now on FanGraphs. It's ridiculous, right? That's not like so the reason I mention it, though, I mean, it is absurd and good for him, but it is completely out of line with what he's done at every level, really, with the exception of like, levels he had like 9 plate appearances or something. So I'm excluding that, right? Like, so, so that gives me some pause with him that maybe the power is, kind of just like a streak he's on or whatever. But like, for example, his 2023 season, he accumulated 419 total plate appearances across different levels in the minors. And get a 110 ISO, right? So I look at that and I see the 307 and I'm like, okay, look, he could have unlocked something. This could be real, right?
Oh, yeah.
But I'm like hitting the brakes a little bit, right? And I'm like, okay, let's see how this goes. So with that context, like in the position you're in ABL, is this a guy you're thinking about selling, to acquire major league talent and cash in on the hype? Or is this a guy you're thinking about holding because you kind of like have been following him and want to see where it goes?
That's a really good question. It's because he really is, and of course, everyone who's watching it, give away everything. No, but it's that from everything that you just said, Steve, he really is sort of like the epitome of a sell high kind of player.
Yeah.
Because also to this point, despite his hot start, it's not like he's shot up to be like number 64 on some prospect lists,
Right.
like, on top 100 lists. He might be more. He was like, if I know people have differences of opinion on MLB Pipeline because it's, a free resource, but Mayo and Callis they've been around a long time.
Sure.
But he's for the last couple of years, he's pretty consistently been like a 15 to 20 player in the Mets system.
Yep.
So that takes a lot to get a big jump at that point. So I feel like it's one of those situations where I just kind of have to see it, and I'm planning on just letting it play out a little bit because I'm fully expecting that this is not going to keep up.
Yeah.
And if it does keep up, he's a top 100 prospect. And then,
sure. If he has 307, like I saw, he's going to be a top 10 prospect, my friend.
So there's going to be some regression coming. It's almost, but the key thing is, what do you do and when do you wait? And it's not exactly the same situation, but I had a player 2 seasons ago, and I'm probably going to butcher the name, but Abimelech Ortiz for the Rangers, corner bat, and he's a lefty though. But main source is power. I picked him up when no one knew who he was, and then he hit like 30 homers.
Yep.
And he went through 3 levels in 1 year, and he just kept hitting. He kept hitting the whole way through. Augustin and Ramirez is like the same way. But both of those players' trajectories kind of show you they went the opposite direction. Last year, Ortiz stayed in AA where he finished 23 and completely tanked until the end of the year and had pretty much no power. I held on to him, but I dealt him at some point in that process. So that would have been like, that would have been a good sell high.
Yep.
Augustin Ramirez, I held on to him and he kept going.
Yep.
His performance fell off a little bit, but he kept rising the levels, and it wasn't enough of a fall that his prospect status actually went up because he showed that he could withstand the level change and being young for his age.
Yep.
And he got traded to the Marlins, and he kept hitting, and now he's going to have some K problems still, but I definitely had lots of interest in him, and I could have sold higher on him, but he kept going up. So it kind of shows you with these kind of players who pop up, who they're not like, they don't come out of nowhere, but they're not exactly, top 100 guys, and they can go in so many different directions.
A lot of volatility.
So it's really just a guessing game. So, it always is, but I could see myself doing either one. I don't think I'm just going to hold on to him. Like, I wouldn't say that, like, he's my guy, and like, he's not like my favorite prospect, so I'm not dealing him no matter what. There are some guys who, like, I wasn't trading Lawler for anything. Even though I had lots of inquiries about him. Like, I'm not going to. Yes, I'm not going to say that for Reimer. I'm not going to say that I'm never going to trade him. But I'm willing to let it play out a little bit because you don't want to.
So what I'm hearing is he can be had for the right price.
Probably.
All right. So
even though
you can have him for the right price.
Breaking news.
There you go. All right. So maybe Jacob will be on the move. It'll be interesting to see as we get to the dump deadline. So let's talk about another guy you have on your roster who I really like coming into the draft. Is Hagen Smith of the White Sox. So Hagen, was was a first-year player draft eligible this year. Was drafted in 2024 in the majors by the White Sox. Really tall, good weight pitcher for the White Sox. Tremendous fastball, devastating slider. Has always had issues about his command and whether that would translate into the major league level as a starting pitcher. I put down here in the crawl his ABL handbook grade, which is quite high, 9.87.
Very high, yes. I enjoyed seeing that whenever it was
I'm
released.
sure you did.
He was my number one guy.
Very high on Hagen Smith. 21 at AA, perfectly fine. In contrast to Reimer, 21 at high A. So this is kind of like what you want to see. A guy like it was a college pitcher who's highly touted. He's at the right level. He's obviously striking out a lot of guys. 39.3% strikeout rate, which is completely consistent with his fastball and slider, right? But that foreshadowing of the command, the 18.7 walk rate, right?
It's very, very high.
Yeah, very high and certainly concerning, but not like, hurricane warning signs. I mean, he's got 25 innings pitched. I mean, you'd like to see him doing better, right? But how are you feeling about him at this point? Obviously, he was a high acquisition cost for you. You had draft him quite high. Where's your mindset on him as you head into the trading season? He's not going to be a guy probably in the marketplace that you can get full premium on right now because of the walk rate. Right? But I'm sure there would be people who would be interested to take him.
It's kind of tricky because I actually in the ACL I kind of mentioned, I put on the trade block that I was a buyer, and I have him in ACL also. I think I got him, but there we were starting from scratch.
Yep.
So he was a later pick there than he would have been in the first year player draft for us in the ABL. So because it was I think I might have got him with the 6th pick. There was a lot of guys who were in close contention there, and not also right around the time that I put him on the trade block there. It was either I don't think it was before, because I'd like to think I wouldn't have done this before, but I believe the White Sox actually said they were going to skip one of his starts because they said that he had. So anyone who wants them, buyer beware. So I'm shooting that trade value right now.
Full disclosure. All right. I like it.
I did chop down that cherry tree. But because they said that they saw some velocity dip and they felt like maybe some fatigue. And in one sense, like, it's great that they shot him straight to AA. So they believe in him. They want to challenge him. The White Sox they got so many guys in their recent trades. And I mean, it might not work out, but they've accumulated both. It wasn't just, sheer numbers of guys they got. They got some high quality prospects there. So they've got a lot of guys competing for spots coming up. But he, pretty much what you said, all the fears, you're getting the whole experience. You're getting all of the highs and the lows all into one that makes you wonder, hey, what's going to happen here? So I put him on the block for the ACL because I felt like in the ACL, I have like a top 3 scoring team. And I'm like, and I also have a very, to me, excellent pitching prospect list. At least I did before I traded some other guys who I may talk about later to get Yoran Alvarez. But so even though he's struggling, he's not having the same kind of year he's having. But
I think he's going to be all right.
And I think a lot of this, we joke, he's still got a lot of red dots on Baseball Savant, so I think he's going to be all right.
I think he's going to be all right.
But so I switched gears and didn't deal him in ACL, and I'm probably going to hold on to him now because I traded a few other guys who I might mention later. But he, for now, to me, it's kind of I'm not someone who is a big wheeler dealer in general. I mean, I'll make a trade to go for it, but I'm not a guy just to trade just to shake things up. Or I'm very patient with my players and generally my prospects unless I see the right thing come along. And I recognize that Smith is a risk.
Yep.
But at the same time, I've still got in the back of my mind that he is, if things go haywire, there's still at least a solid chance that he's a lights out
Yep.
reliever that I could use for a couple years.
Yep. No,
Um,
there is that
but
upside for the guy like him.
but it doesn't always work out. Like Riley Pint hasn't worked out, but I mean, he was high
Riley
school.
Pint.
But he was, some of the high school guys tend to flame out a little bit more than that. And Smith has the college pedigree
Yep.
and all that. But when you see that control, and I will admit now, also full disclosure, I've generally been a sucker for lefty pitchers. I have a
Nothing
lot
wrong
of
with that.
lefty pitchers in my
There's
system.
nothing wrong with a lefty pitcher who throws really hard.
Yep. They're not all going to turn. They're not all going to be Randy Johnson.
No, but we can all dream, right? It's like
But
I think that's what happens. Like, Noah Schultz is my guy. Like, he was like, a big, tall lefty who
especially
throws really hard.
nowadays, I mean, you can still get by being a lefty throwing 88, 89 now. You can't get by being a righty throwing 88, 89. But if you can throw in the high
Miles
90s,
Nicholas, is he getting by? I mean,
he's the craft. He's been around long enough now that
he's the crafty right-hander. Yeah,
he's grandfathered in.
I think the only thing he's crafting is giving up home runs. Don't worry, So I will tell you, Hagen Smith. I do like Hagen a lot. I think he has a very interesting kind of potential future. I think you're right. There is some elite closer, risk there. Risk it with a lowercase r, because I think he could be a very effective reliever. But I think he probably ends up starting. It's going to be really interesting to see as he develops, whether his command comes in line with his stuff. But he is the type of player that I would absolutely be targeting as a buyer of prospects, right? Because, I think I can probably get a potential elite talent at something of a discount because of the risk that is manifested. So these are the kind of players as I'm looking over rosters and I'm saying, like, all right, can I buy low on this guy?
Yeah.
Right? And low in the sense that maybe there's an owner who's a little nervous now, right? And I think the art to the deal there is trying to give up enough value that the owner feels like they're not paying 50 cents on the dollar, right? They're actually getting something they deserve for a player that you drafted in 1.8. Okay, so that, it's a high draft pick in the league. So I'd want to buy you out at a price where you felt like, I'm getting value for this. But recognizing that, in order for me to do the deal, I've got to at least not give up full value for 1.8. Maybe I'm giving up 1.20 or 1.15. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to target something that's a modest discount on a Hagen Smith. That's my mindset as I'm going to play.
And that's why. And I don't. And I have this really weird. Maybe I'm wrong, but the trade values in ABL, it's all over the place especially when you deal prospects for major leaguers. And I know that's probably a topic we were going to talk about a little bit later. But there are some times where I'll look at a deal and I'll go, I have absolutely no idea how that happened. That's way too, that's really you gave up that major leaguer for just that one guy who's a prospect, who's 19.
Yeah.
That's, and so it surprises me so that's why I've gotten a lot of offers for some prospects in the past that I go, I feel like other owners would take this, but there's no way in heck I am. So I feel like that certainly there's been, I think, just to sort of close that on Smith, I'm not going to lie, the doubt has crept into my mind.
Sure.
But I'm not looking to move on from that at this point because I would probably feel like what you're saying, someone might be trying to buy low.
Yeah. So this is why I picked him to talk about, because I think he's a very interesting use case. Right. It's you have to also.
He's a perfect example of what you're saying.
Yeah. So, you have to know your audience too, right? The counterparty of the deal, right? Are they a prospect guy? Are they like just looking to like, win it all? Do they really value, near term value, right?
Mhm.
And the interesting thing about Smith is that he's 22 and he's in Double A, right? So he's not that far from the majors, right? And pitching, young, talented pitching in this league has tremendous value, right? Because we've seen how the market is
Mhm.
for starting pitching in the auction, and it's outrageous. Okay, so
Absolutely. Yep. Mhm.
to me, a guy like Hagen Smith has tremendous trade value, like in terms of acquiring him, and it's something in my view, you should get a lot
Mhm.
for if you were going to move him because you know if he clicks, right, he's going to be like really, really valuable in this league. Um, and so I'll contrast him, for example, to a guy like Chase Burns, right, who was
Yep.
also a high first round pick in this league. Very similar kind of profile, better command, right? Doesn't have like as an elite pitch as Hagen Smith's slider is, but has like very good pitches. And they're all above average. Like
Mhm.
Chase Burns, is a terrific pitcher. I had Chase Burns rated a little higher than Hagen Smith, but very similar. Um,
Yep.
but Chase Burns has crushed it. Right, he's having a great campaign. And I actually acquired him in ACL. As one of the
Oh, you did? Oh, there you go.
yeah,
Yeah.
so, like he was a guy that I was targeting, but I don't think I could acquire him in ABL. Like, and one of the reasons is so John
Right.
and the Tigers drafted Chase Burns, and I reached out to John when he drafted him. He drafted him very high in the draft, and I was like, I love this pick for you. Like I think he drafted him 1-5. I was just like, like
Yep.
that was the pick because I actually had him numerically in the handbook. I think he was my like second best prospect in the draft. Like I
That sound
yeah, I love Chase Burns.
yeah, especially with the ABL value of pitchers baked into it. That sounded familiar from I remember whenever you were ranking your guys.
Yeah, and so because he was a pitcher, I had dropped him down in what I suggested people should do, but I actually had him ranked right where John ended up drafting him, and I just thought it was like brilliant, right? Um,
Mhm.
John's not like he's a very savvy prospect owner. He's not going to trade Chase Burns, right? So in ACL, where I was able to acquire him, it was a guy who's not an ABL, right? I don't know how much 30 team league experience he has, and he hasn't had the benefit of 5 years of ABL and seeing it play out and how the prospect value really for pitchers really can catch up with you quick, right? And I was like,
Right.
maybe if I offer you these two like major leaguers you can't keep, maybe you'll trade me Chase Burns. And he did. I was like, great, So I traded like Jazz Chisholm and Lawrence Butler for Chase Burns. And so, in both of those
Two
contracts,
very
yeah,
yeah, two very solid, yeah.
yeah, but like,
Yeah.
and Jazz was on the IL. So I was like, this is great. And I couldn't keep it either one of those contracts. So I was, but I don't think you can have that kind of trade in ABL because of the maturation of the league. It's further along.
Mhm.
I think the owners have seen too much water under the bridge to make a trade like that. So it's kind of an interesting juxtaposition of the league you're in, knowing the owners, and
Yep.
expectations. So instead of a Chase Burns, a guy like Hagen Smith is a dude like if I was to reach out to you, I'd be like, what are you doing with Hagen Smith, right? But I would expect you
Yep.
to say exactly what you just said, right? So like I would think that trade wouldn't go anywhere, but like that's the kind of guy I'd be looking for, right? I'd be like, all right, what about him? Because I'm not
But
chasing.
it's the perfect juxtaposition.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like I'm not
like
chasing
we're
bigger
talking about
fingers.
Reimer is the sell high.
Yeah,
Is this going to happen? Smith is the buy low, and
yeah,
that's the
yeah,
perfect.
and,
That's why
and,
it's the
and
perfect
low's a
way to put it.
lowercase, right? Because it's like it's not
Oh, right.
terrible, but it's just enough to make you nervous, right? And so that's what I'm looking for. I'm like, all right, this guy. All right, so let's talk about another guy you have on your roster, right? And this is kind of a different narrative, and so I wanted to talk about Benny Montgomery of the Rockies, right? So Benny is a guy. I put his like prospect handbook grade there as well, 6.71, right? So a lower class, if you will, of prospects than Hagen Smith. But if you notice, I did not have Reimer rated because he wasn't owned at the time of the handbook's publication.
That's
And
right.
he's also
So yeah.
he's not in like the Baseball America top 30 for the Mets. So like he wouldn't have had a grade from them. I haven't checked to see if he was graded in Baseball HQ, but I can while we're on the pod.
Yeah, I could check pipelines if you're curious what pipelines grades are, but
Yeah, no, happy to. Yeah, I mean, so like it's an interesting question. Like Benny Montgomery is a dude who um, got drafted pretty high in a lot of drafts, right? I think because he plays for Colorado, he's an outfielder, he's got power. Real questions about his hit tool, right? Um, we see here he's 22 at Double A. Again, age appropriate, but out of the prospects we've been talking about, we just talked about Hagen Smith, right? 21 at Double A. He's 22 at Double A. All right, not terrible, but a little bit older than Hagen Smith. Really not in Hagen Smith's weight class in terms of his pedigree. 127 plate appearances, a 34.6 strikeout rate. He had a cup of tea like in Double A last year, had like a 41% strikeout rate. But I'm kind of like throwing that out by the wayside, right? 34% is like pretty high relative to his prior kind of full season in the minors, which is in the high 20s. Okay, so like, but he's not like 34.6 is not like out of control relative. Like, it's not like beyond what I would expect for him. And he's now facing tougher pitching at Double A than he was, in High A, right? So, how are you feeling about Benny at this point, given the relative risk of his prospect raise, his performance to date, and what kind of tarnish do you think he's carrying like into the trade season? Like, is he a guy you think you can move, or you're like, well, I got to hold him because like I'm not going to get value for him?
I think he's going to be in that latter part of what you just said. So actually, I think I got him last year in a deal. I want to say it was actually from Adam in the Phillies, because Montgomery is purely he's a pedigree guy.
Yep.
But who Benny Montgomery is, and it's kind of what's the best way to put this? He was essentially the Connor Griffin of his draft.
That's high praise.
Because Connor Griffin is Benny Montgomery when he was drafted. I want to say it was in 20. If he's 22 now, I guess it must have been in 21. I think. But he was the high school guy with all the tools. But can he hit?
Yep.
He's got the arm. He's got the speed. He's got some pop. He was one of the highest high school kids taken in that draft, and he's going to Colorado.
It was 21. That was the year he was drafted.
Oh, thank you. Okay, good. Yeah. So he was a pedigree guy, and the shine has already fallen off. Now he had some okay. He had an okay start.
Yeah,
but he hasn't gone. And sorry, he hasn't gone all Elijah Green on everybody. I know but he wasn't. He wasn't to that degree, but and then last year, but people were like, is he going to hit? Is he going to hit at all? And especially as he climbs the ladder.
Yeah.
Like Reimer, he started off last year at a level Double A and then got hurt and missed the whole year.
Mm-hmm.
So I acquired him when he was already hurt, knowing that he was hurt.
Buy low.
So that was my buy low, purely pedigree, Colorado tools.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, and at the time, I also didn't have a whole lot of outfielders in my system. So I'm like, and I also acquired, I think, Dalen Lyle from Jeff and the Cardinals in a deal as well. So, and that's turning out a little bit better than Montgomery right now because he got promoted to AAA.
So I'm looking at your trade. I'm pulling up Benny for you, right? So you traded. It wasn't with Jeff. You were correct that it was. It's actually been traded a couple times. You got Montgomery and a third-round pick for Jake Berger. So Jake.
Yes, that's right. Yep.
Yeah. So he's actually been. He was drafted.
That's right.
He was drafted by the White Sox, not Tom the White Sox, but our prior White Sox owner, who should not be named.
Yes.
And traded to
the dumper.
Traded to Lenny in the red. Okay, and then traded to the Phillies in some ridiculous trade, and then traded to you. So he's been around the block. A lot of pedigree trades. And I think this is kind of like, a lot of people speculating on his upside, right? And you kind of see that, and it's consistent with what you described too. You're like, all right, well, and look, the trade you got, which is in June of 2024, so right around the dump deadline. So it's probably one of your, trades where you're like, I'm selling all my major leaguers, I'm going to cash out. That's a pretty good trade for you, right? You gave up Jake Berger, who ended up having a pretty good year last year.
And he was not doing very well at the time at the start of the year, which was frustrating to me because I thought that he was going to be a big selling chip as my season went down the drain.
Yep.
And he got hot like immediately after I traded him. So I felt like I could have got more than what I did. But at the time I was like, I had floated him out there and that was the best offer that I had. So instead of being a little bit more patient, I went for this because of the pedigree and the tools, just in case, knowing that there was that injury there. And he was in Double-A as a 21-year-old last year. So which was whether he deserved it or not.
It makes sense. It makes sense. And I think, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. Go ahead. I think I was done anyway.
All right. So, I think one of the interesting things to me about a player like Benny Montgomery is he kind of fills the narrative of a player that starts getting passed around like the village bicycle, right? Like people are like, this is an interesting guy. I'll take him. And then like there's something of a game of musical chairs in there. Like you don't want to be the last guy holding it. Right. And there comes a point where you can't move him anymore. Right. And you actually have another player on your roster, Christian Hernandez, who I think falls into this category. Right. Like I think he's been traded back and forth between Sam and me a bunch. Then he's been a couple other rosters. Now he's on your roster.
Sure you took him, right?
Oh, yeah. I drafted him.
I got him from you. Who did I get? I don't remember who I traded you for.
His history, his transaction history is probably like, a trip around like the globe in ABL. But like, at some point, you worry that like a player like that is going to lose enough luster that you can't ever get anything for him. And I think, that can happen for different reasons. And for him, his struggles are not so great right now that like he's untradeable, right? So he's not like Elijah Green, right? Like who's going to start getting cut in most leagues if he hasn't been already. But you're starting to get diminishing returns for him. Like, could you get a Jake Berger and for him at this point? I don't know. Like maybe.
I don't think you could. I don't think you could. And as sort of and I don't remember the thing that's there's a couple of guys who are pretty high picks from the last couple of years who either aren't rostered or in the same scenario. Like Jacob Berry's one of them. Like you can't. You can get. I guess this is sort of the thought is like you can only go so far in pedigree.
Yeah.
And
you gotta.
And the thing is like, and Montgomery still has the tools there.
Yep.
But it's not working. And he's a first round pick. Colorado stinks. Sorry, Colorado fans, but they have not been. But there's room there in the next couple of years where all he has to do is be serviceable, and he could probably make the major leagues even in a backup role and maybe toil around for a little bit and maybe get you some points that way.
Oh yeah, but, he's probably going to be a big roster. It's just what is he going to get you?
Right.
Yeah, so
Jacob Berry, Kevin Parada, some of those guys, they're like, are they even? I don't even think they're rostered right now. Top 10 picks or top 15 picks who are projected to be hitters, and they haven't. And now they're toast, and the pedigree can only get you so far. So Montgomery is, because of the injury last year. That's also like, okay, he missed the whole year. There's a lot of guys out there, not just prospects. There's a lot of major leaguers who, like Matt McClain, Sandy Alcantara. Like some of these guys who missed all last year are struggling. It takes some time. But sooner or later, that goodwill is going to run out. So I'm not expecting anyone to ask to he is not even on the buy low. He's on
Right.
the buy in the dirt category at this
Right,
point.
and you
So
don't wanna sell it for that, right? I mean, like, I wouldn't either. I mean, I would
right,
hold on to a Benny Montgomery and see what happens. And if you get an uptick in value, he gets hot, then maybe you think about dealing him, right? Because maybe you can cash in
but
at that point.
r- right, and it's also tricky because he's also the kind of guy that you don't want to say, you know what, I've had it.
Yeah,
You cut
yeah,
him,
yeah.
and then that's the guy who, right when you cut him, starts to figure like you said, you don't want to be the one holding him, but you also don't want to be the one cutting him
It's
too
tiger
soon.
tiger by the
Like
tail,
like
man.
like
That's what he is.
like 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 to me, he's the guy who I feel like, you know what? I don't have the same hopes for him right now as I did when I acquired him, but
Yeah.
I don't mind I'm gonna cut a few more guys on my prospect list before him.
Oh,
I'm
sure.
gonna let him try to play out of it for a while. I'm not gonna cut that bait, but I'm watching you, you know?
Yeah. He's on the reverse watch list. You're like, I'm checking this out, but I agree. You can't move on from him. So let's pivot a little bit away from your roster. There are two other guys that I wanted to kind of spotlight, but they're along the same veins as we've been talking about this evening, right? So like, one of them is Leo DeVries. The
Mhm.
Padres electric shortstop. He's getting a ton of hype, really high draft pick for most leagues a couple years ago. Another guy that the Padres have accelerated in terms of the developmental
Mhm.
scale. He's 18 at high A, extremely young for the level. I put his prospect handbook grade in there, a 9.85. Another
Yeah.
like really highly graded, just under Hagen Smith that we looked at earlier. Um,
Yep.
you know,
9.87, yep.
tremendous like upside. His slash line is respectable, not great, right? If you look at this, 276, 353, 480. Not unusual to see a younger guy for the level have a low slugging percentage, low isolated power, because they're just facing guys who are older and physically more mature. So that's not terribly unusual, and he's holding his own. This is not like Ethan Salas struggles, right? I mean,
Oh,
he's like he's doing well.
oh,
His stats, his metrics, like Baseball America keeps writing about him. He's like like hitting lasers all over the field, and like people like rave about him. He's getting a ton of publicity right now. I think I've read like 4 or 5 articles about Leo DeVries like in the last month,
mhm,
right? So here's a guy who's going to be like a red hot commodity going into like trade season, right? Um,
mhm.
and from my perspective, if I'm a seller, right, this is a guy I'm not moving unless like the earth moves, right, in a return,
Right.
right. And I don't know how you feel about it, is because you're a seller. This is a guy I'd certainly like to buy, right, but I'm not
Oh,
like
yep.
as a guy who's trying to acquire prospects at the deadline this year. you know there is a value in not putting all your chips on one dude, right, like to acquire like
Absolutely.
depth in return. Like I'm sure I could trade the house for Leo DeVries, right, but do I really want to
Mhm.
do that for a guy who's 18? Right? And like there's a lot of trajectory left, like a lot of runway before he reaches the majors. Like I don't know what he's going to be like. Is he going to develop power? Is he really worth trading like all my chips for? He might be, but I'm like, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's so tricky, but I mean, it's no, oh, no, no, you're good. It's tough because like, him and Made,
Hmm.
they are they are the talk of the prospect lovers town.
Yep.
They are, you know, Abbott and Costello. They can right now, it is, who's on first, who's on short. That's them.
Yep.
Those are those 2 guys. And it's tricky because everything you said is exactly true. There is that you see those numbers, and I mean, I would say that those are pretty good numbers for anybody in high A.
Yeah.
For an 18-year-old,
Yeah.
that is, and especially if they're saying like, probably the baseball savant, the exit velocity, all that information, it's also very good. So it's possible that even those numbers are being muted a little bit
Yeah.
from maybe he's even been a little unlucky. Don't have his Fangraphs page up, but um, he is but that's probably more of a particular owner, you know, and a specific owner's preference.
Yep.
You know, some guys always want the hottest ticket in town. So, and are you a believer?
Mm-hmm.
If you're not a believer, it depends.
Yeah. I mean, you could get paid some
I
serious.
feel like, yeah, in ABL, I feel like he's the kind of guy you hold.
Oh, I agree. So,
In
by the
other,
way,
like, maybe.
go ahead. Finish your sentence. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, no, go ahead. I'm curious. I'm super curious.
So, one of the things I like about Leo Vries in ABL is he's owned by Don of the Padres. Not Don. What's his name?
Oh, I
Yeah.
I didn't actually know. So,
Hold on. I think it's Gary.
or
Yeah.
the Red Sox.
No. It's the Padres. I love the fact that he's owned by a guy who's in
Great, yeah,
prospecting. It's like
yeah.
so. Yeah. So this is in the Cal family. Maybe Cal can work out a deal with him with his dad. I don't know.
Oh, wait, is it Padres
Oh
or
no,
is
it's
it
not
Red
Padres.
Sox?
This is Alan's dad. This is the Padres. Yeah, the
Yeah,
Padres.
Alan's dad. Yeah,
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 yeah. So maybe Alan can work
yeah.
out a deal with him. I mean, I don't know. I mean, like, this is like all in the family kind of shit. But yeah,
Too many.
there's too much family going on in our league. So but yeah, I mean, this
I
is
know it's hard to keep track of.
yeah. So he was picked by the Twins by Tyler, 1.14 in 2024, and traded to the Padres um, for a boatload. All right, so
Oh, so he gave up a price to get him. Then he really did.
yeah, so this is I actually think this is a trade I commented on last year at the dump deadline is like an interesting deal to me. So he got
Hmm.
a second round pick, DeVries, Isaac Coffey, Walter Ford, and Blake Perkins for Santander, Finnegan, a fourth round pick, Yu Darvish, and CJ Abrams. Um,
Whoa, that isn't, and you don't often see. That's like all major leaguers for all
yeah,
future asset kind of deal. That's a and there's a lot of risk in that. That was a lot. That was a very risky deal.
yeah, and so I mean, the way I like read that deal is it's almost entirely for DeVries. Right? You got a second round
Oh
pick
yeah. Yeah.
in Coffee, right? I mean, the other guys are like, interesting prospects, but like, they're not going to
Yeah.
move the needle. But
But
like,
they're not. Yeah, that's one of those ones where I'll be like, yeah, I feel like that you gave up too much for that.
it's a lot.
But
It's
so
quite a
far,
lot.
but DeVries is he's bringing it home.
Yeah, yeah.
If
So
he
he's doing it. But this goes back to my point for a guy like DeVries, right? This year, like to get him, right? You're going to have to get, particularly from the owner who traded so much. Look, he's 10-11. He's probably not going to be a big buyer at the deadline, but like
Mhm.
he traded the house for him. So you're going to have to trade the house
Yep.
back to him, right? I mean, and so you look at this. So as
Yep.
somebody who's like hunting for prospects, I just, as much as I like DeVries, I'm crossing him off the list, right? I'm just never going to get him for a price I can live with,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, well, the Padres though, that NL he's only one out of the NL West lead though. The NL West is for
I
us
know.
is in there. So that might make it as a perfect kind of, hey, you wait, maybe not right at the dump date, but you get closer to the deadline, and if you're still hanging in there, you might be able to
Yeah,
get that haul right back
you could,
just for him. I mean,
you could.
if he's keeping it up, you might be able to get a team that's maybe underperforming a little bit, or maybe a team that is, we certainly have those teams that dump that don't really need to dump.
Yep.
you know, that who are maybe the sixth, seventh, eighth team in the playoff race. And if you want to get that playoff spot, you just want to get in and get that chance, then maybe that happens for
Yeah.
him,
Well,
because
it'd be an
I
interesting
mean,
game to watch. You know,
he's exceeded my expectations.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I'm a big DeVries fan. I have been since the draft, like when he was coming up. But like the acquisition cost has always been too high for me. I have one share of him in one league.
yeah.
So let's talk about another player who I really like, who's kind of a slightly different story. But it's Walter Jenkins or Walker Jenkins, excuse me, of the Twins. 9.96 handbook grade, right? this is like one of my highest graded prospects,
Cream
right?
of the crop. Yep. Top
Right,
10. Yep.
right. I mean, if it wasn't for the injury he had last year, he would have been the number one prospect in the handbook. Like,
Yep.
I mean, I did the math. I just changed the factor. I think he went right to the top. So Roman Anthony was my number one rated guy, and he would have jumped Roman Anthony. He got hurt again, right? And he's just literally back. He has 8 plate appearances at AA at age 20. All right.
Yep.
Young for his age, elite talent, but cannot stay on the field, right? So a slightly different narrative, right? So we talked about Hagen Smith, who has what's the skill, or are you worried about the skill grade? We talked about Benny, the skill grade on the strikeouts, right? We talked about Vries, who's like showing the stuff and is maybe too expensive to acquire. Can you get a discount on Walker Jenkins because of fear of the injury bug? Is he like another, Chase DeLauder?
That was the first name that came. That was the first guy I was thinking of. But
I raise him, Jenkins, because I've started to read that narrative in Baseball America and elsewhere that geez, it's kind of concerning that he's missing all this development time, and is he one of these dudes who just isn't on the field enough or can't stay healthy? So what are your thoughts on him? First of all, do you have any of those fears or concerns going in, or is this a guy you're just he's awesome, I'm not worried about him?
yeah, it's tricky because I have him in one of my my other home leagues. It's like a 16-team league that I've been in for a long time, and it's kind of tricky. I was just looking up because I couldn't. I didn't know what actually happened this year. What kind of injury did he have this year? I know it was
his ankle. Let's find out.
Okay, because he had it was a quad problem last year,
Mm-hmm.
And he had a hamstring. So that's kind of where you get more of the worry.
Yep.
Because sometimes things are just freak accidents. Like DeLauder, an example, because DeLauder's had a lot of weird things happen to him.
It's not just broken foot or DeLauder to me has red flags that I really don't like. They strange injuries that you're like, what bone is that? I don't even know if it was a joint.
Exactly.
Half the season, you're like, this is great. Jenkins had an ankle injury. It was an ankle.
Okay.
Yeah. So obviously people have ankle injuries. They get back on the field. And he's a guy that could wipe out these concerns by going on a streak now. It's only mid-May, right?
Sure.
So he could tear the cover off the ball the rest of the season and be the talk of the town. He's a tremendous, skilled athlete. But can you capitalize at this kind of unique juncture of the season where he has missed substantial time and you're starting to see that narrative out there? So again, to me, this is the guy I'm like, can I get him?
I think there are certainly people out there who I don't think it would be. I mean, I don't want to say this rudely, but I don't think it would be the smartest thing to do necessarily. I think there needs to be a little bit more. I certainly think that it could be out there. There are people who would be. There could be more buy low people. There could be more people who want to get him, and there also could be some people who go,
yeah.
I totally understand it. Me, I don't think I would get there with him yet. I think I'm there with DeLauder. I have DeLauder and Jenkins in the same league, actually.
Yeah.
In this other one, I think I'm there with DeLauder, even if it's more some freak things that have happened. Yep. I'm not there with Jenkins yet, but I could totally see people going, because he's not a 24, 25-year-old. He hasn't done this. He's only been playing. This is only his second full season playing. He's in around that time, he's performed so well that he's jumped up to AA.
Yeah.
If he's missed so much time and he struggled in there and or he got held back because they wanted to get him more development time, then I would be a little bit more willing to say, hey, let's see what we can get for him.
Yeah.
I could see people though, exactly what you're saying, some people who get the itch
Yeah.
and they see it, they go, I don't want to be the one holding the bag. If that ACL gets torn, or because sometimes just the black cat follows you around. Is
Yeah.
that what happens? I'm not feeling that way yet, but I can certainly see people
Yeah.
doing that.
Now I can tell you this, like, so Jenkins is owned by Mark of Cleveland Guardians in our league in ABL. He also owns him at ACL. All right, and I can tell you that I made a run at Jenkins and ACL on for this reason that we just discussed, right?
Oh, so how did that turn out?
So we had some discussions, and I was talking about um, Butler, Marte, Kendall Marte, or Jazz. I was going to trade, multiple players for Jenkins. And I think at one point, if I remember, I'm literally looking at the Discord exchange between us. I think at one point I offered all three for Jenkins.
Ooh.
Right. And he declined. Like,
so that goes to show you what you both think of him.
Yeah.
And that. And I feel like Mark's the kind of guy, and Mark, to me, and maybe Mark makes his deals. He's not a wheeler dealer, but he knows when to hold them and he knows when to fold them.
Yeah. He was like, he wanted to make a deal with me. He didn't want to give up his best prospect, right?
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about Jenkins in that league is he's $8, right? So
so that's
So you're not, there was risk on my side because at that price, it's not as attractive as he is in ABL, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he's so close to the majors in my view. If he can stay on the field, I think he's an elite talent. That I was like, oh, all right, I'll trade. Now keep in mind, I then turned around and traded two of those guys for Chase Burns.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
And I also traded Marte in a separate deal and got other players back in that. I got Theo Gillen and Demetrio Crisantes.
Yes.
Who then just went down for the year with a shoulder problem.
Oh, geez, I didn't actually see that. Oh, man.
It broke today. I have him in like every league I'm in.
Oh man. But I mean, hopefully he was a big pop-up guy.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm annoyed, but it is
I understand.
Yeah. So Jenkins is a guy who I don't think gets moved at the deadline in this league. And Mark's probably right about that. But he's kind of an interesting story, right? There's these narratives about these guys. So those are the players I wanted to spotlight as we were kind of progressing towards the draft. But I also wanted to leave an opportunity for you to talk about any crushes or fades you had as we're heading into this part of the season.
Yeah. So I feel like especially in ABL, and it's now leaked over into ACL, I've been more of the I feel like I've been more of a pitcher side of things, like understanding like how important the pitching is in those leagues for scoring and having the young pitching. And even though, yes, every single one of them could break at any moment, and I certainly have a few pitchers. I've had pitchers who I've kept through their Tommy John surgeries or some other long surgeries. But there's three guys right now who are lighting up the strikeout totals, and I have two of them and I have all three of them in different leagues I've owned. I just traded one of them. The first one is Trey Yesavage. So from the Blue Jays. And I was lucky enough to get him an ACL, and he was part of my deal with Adam in the ACL to get Alvarez. I traded Yesavage and Mick Abel, who had quite the debut the day I traded him, like hours later. But I was like, the numbers I know were a bit of a caveat because for whatever reason Toronto started him in low A, and he was definitely like too advanced for that. But I think they were probably just slow playing a little bit. But he's already been promoted to high A, and when you see the high strikeout numbers that are like what Hagen Smith is doing, except without those walk numbers,
great. Yeah,
it's almost across the board. And when you've got the skills to match, that's what it goes with. Another one who I think a lot of people were concerned if last year was a fluke or not was Jonah Tong for the
Oh,
Mets.
and Tong is killing it right now. He really is.
And he got off to a little bit of a slower start his first couple of starts, and now he's just on fire again.
Yep.
And he's someone who I regretted in ABL because he was a guy that nobody had, and that's sort of almost a lesson to everyone where if you have a gut feeling and you have an inkling and you see a guy, cut your 20th guy and go with it. What's the
Yeah.
worst that you could do? Because
Yep.
he was like that for like a week or 2 weeks for me last year. And I waited. I'm like, I can probably get him. I can get him. I didn't get him.
Yeah.
And I did get him in another one of my home leagues, but he's just been incredible. And the other one is sort of the opposite. Like, Savage was the pedigree.
Mm-hmm.
Tong is the holdover. The pop up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm lucky enough that I have in both ABL and ACL. And I think in ACL I drafted him, and then I let him go and I picked him back up again. Is Gage Jump
Oh
of the
yeah.
Athletics, who has been absolutely ridiculous.
He has been.
And he's a college guy. He's a lefty.
Yep. You said you like lefties.
Yep. But he's not a tall lefty. Like, I feel like I thought that he was a tall lefty, but he's not. But he was not really. He was a third or fourth round pick.
Mm-hmm.
He's only 6 feet, 200 pounds. So there's a little bit of a risk there.
Yep.
And they started him in high A. He's 22, but they already promoted him in double A. He's got 8 walks and 59 strikeouts in 43 innings. So
Yep.
I was lucky enough that I jumped, sorry, bad pun, in
That's
there
unintended.
early on him. And I'm lucky in that regard, but and who knows what the athletics situation is going to be like in the next couple of years, but he's because of how I have him in these leagues, and like I've followed him a lot closer now, and he's done very well.
He's an interesting guy. Like Jump, I was actually looking at him on your roster. It was one of the guys I might talk with you about. So I'm glad you brought him up. What's interesting to me is like when he got promoted to double A this year, like his strikeout rate, and it's only 12 innings, but it dropped down, right? So he's like 1306 at 10.5, only 12 innings, but that was something that I would want to keep monitoring to see if he's leveling out a little bit. Because at 22 at high A, he's a little old for the level. Now he's kind of like competitive for the level. Want to see how that develops. His walk rate ticked up a little bit. Again, only 12 innings, so you don't want to overreact to any of that, right? But like, I would want to see how that progresses as we move through the spring, and whether he can inch it back up to the ratios that he had or something close to that. I would expect some regression in terms of the ratios, just given the level. So
exactly,
it'd be really interesting to see how that like plays out. But at the acquisition cost you're describing, like who gives a hoot, right? Like, you've got it on your roster, you can check it out. I think 6 feet for a starting pitcher, as we've talked about, is like a little short. So there's definitely some durability questions that are going to prop up there. 200 pounds is good, for that frame. And there's certainly some bullpen risk. But again, at the acquisition cost, he's not walking guys. Like, there's a good path to the majors if he doesn't walk people. And, can he get in a strikeout rate that you can really see him being like a number 3 or a number 2 starter? And if he turns out to be a 4 or 5, that acquisition cost, great.
We need those. You need those in your. You definitely need those in your alley with
it's a 30-team league, right? And the walkout rate's fantastic. I mean, it's
And what I found too is that I've definitely accumulated a lot of these pitchers, and being able to like, like if I've got to deal some here or there, and that's like I'm always scouring for the pitchers, because I mean some of them are going to get hurt, some of them are going to flame out, some of them are going to become middle relievers, some of them are going to be back end starters, and some of them are going to somehow turn into Cole Reagans whenever you pick them up for $1 off of the waiver wire. So it's all you never really know. But he whenever I saw, I mean, the video game numbers, especially when you're at a level like, okay, a college guy going to high A makes sense. Like, but like video game numbers, I mean, that's even better than what you can expect. Like, that's not realistic. You're not going to have a 15K per nine rate
Yeah.
forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but when you get up, I mean, if you get up and it goes to 10 or 11, well, hey, that's still not too shabby.
Nope.
And if and you still keep that walk rate low, that's what you're looking for.
Yeah. No, I agree. He's a very interesting prospect. Yeah, I like him too. Any fades?
So the two that I came up with were guys who are pretty much considered top 100 guys. They've been sort of known for a while. And it's tough because, I mean, I'm a Pirates fan, and everyone just like, it seems like everyone just comes up, and there's been a lot of strikeout rate problems that have come up.
Mm-hmm.
So even when you see guys whose numbers, if the strikeout numbers now get too high, and you're approaching the major leagues and you're striking out a ton in AAA,
Mm-hmm.
and you're also not destroying the ball, like maybe your
Right.
numbers are okay, then it's been a little cause of concern for me. And two of those guys right now are Emmanuel Rodriguez for the Twins and Owen Cassie for the Cubs.
Owen Cassie. Yeah.
So like Cassie, I know this isn't plate appearances, but Cassie's got 51 Ks already in about 150 plate appearances. And I mean, his OPS is 797. He's got 6 homers. I mean, his walk rate's pretty good. It's 20%. It's 20 walks in about 150 plate appearances. But
Yeah.
when you're striking out about over 33% of the time, that's not good. And Rodriguez's is even worse. Now, I recognize like Rodriguez is only 22. Cassie's also only 22. Like, they're young, so
Yeah.
you can probably sit them in AAA a little bit. Like, I mean, in some degree, it's kind of amazing that they're in AAA to begin with, as it is when you're at 22. And Rodriguez, like, he's hitting 234, 375, 387. He's only got the 3 homers, but he's got 50 Ks already in about 135 plate appearances. It's even
Yep.
a worse rate than Cassie is. So that doesn't, it's not the end all be all, but those are guys because, again, they're 22. People, you, there's still a lot of time to make up from that. But from right
Yep.
now, if those were guys you were hoping to sell high on, you want to hold on to them for a little bit
Yeah,
because
that ship hasn't gone the way you want it to right now. If you're trying to sell high on those dudes.
yeah. And Nick York, as a
Yep.
Pirate, everyone loved him. He had lots of red dots last year on the Baseball Savant, and he kind of came back after a down year, and he was hitting with the Red Sox and he hit with the Pirates. And this year he's got an OPS under 700 in AAA, and it's not what Pirates fans have wanted to see so far, because I think they would rather have had him called up and in that on that roster with how bad everybody's doing on the whole team
Yeah.
anyways.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And he's not. I mean, again, he's only 22. He's still young, so people forget that. And he made his debut pretty young last year, but it's he doesn't have some of the other tools that Cassie and Rodriguez have. He doesn't have that power. He
Yep.
doesn't have the set position. So what's going to happen there if he doesn't start to hit again
Yep.
soon?
Yep. I'm looking at Rodriguez's Fangraphs page. One of the things that's interesting to me about him, I've always liked Rodriguez. I've never loved him, but I've always liked him. One of the things that's really interesting to me is his walk rate over the years, his career. Like, he typically has somewhere between 22 to 25% walk rate.
Which is very high, very good.
Yeah, and right now it's 17.6. So I would expect that to like move up, back closer to his norm. His strikeout rate, however, has always been in the mid to high 20s.
Mm-hmm.
So the 36.8% strikeout rate he's suffering through right now is maybe a little high, but I think this is who he is. I mean, I think this is the player he is now. Like, what you end up having with that is, depending on your scoring format, it's a guy who could have value. Like, he can get on base, right? He's going to generate points in a league like ABL. The question is whether or not the Twins are going to give him enough playing time, right? Rather than platoon him or get frustrated with him because he goes through slumps. He's going to be prone to that because he does have contact issues, and he's always going to have contact issues. But he does walk a ton. And when he does make contact, he's got power. So he's a very interesting player to me. The Twins are loaded with young talent and hitters, and I don't know, there's probably not going to be any impatience to promote him. Like, they're probably going to let him stew there for a little bit in AAA, go to your point. So it'll be interesting to me to see kind of like what he becomes as a major leaguer.
It's so tough because they've had a lot of young talent on the hitting side for the last couple. They've had a lot of young talent around, and no one really talks about them. But they've had a lot of guys who either who are highly touted or who kind of are really good performers in the high minors. Then they get there, and then they just kind of
fizzle away.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with Kirilloff because he went to a neighboring high school of mine, and then he kept getting hurt.
Yeah,
it took Larnach forever to get where he is. Julien got off to a hot start, and he's down in the minors. Miranda disappointed. You got Brooks Lee.
Snaked by injury too. Miranda.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Brooks Lee, a couple of these other, you got.
Yeah, they also have a guy named Walker Jenkins.
Yeah, and
we talked about earlier, right? I mean, so they're loaded with talent. I just think it's interesting to see what's going to happen with Twins development. They're hitting for the reasons you said. They've had a lot of hit and misses, and guys who are post type, success stories. So we'll see.
Yep.
Well, listen, Zach, it's been great to have you on. I really appreciate it. I know you got a lot going on with the house and the Little League and the T-ball and all the other things going on in your life. So I really appreciate you coming on the show and talking. It's always great. Covered a lot of ground. Looking forward to seeing what you do as we approach the dump date. Maybe we'll make a deal. You never know. I know what players I can't get from you. So that's always helpful. For everybody else watching at home, wherever you are, remember to ABP. Always be prospecting. Thanks, man.